from selling oranges in like those crowded, aisles of a London theater to like capturing the heart of a king, right? It's a story that
Yeah.
almost sounds, like something out of like a fairy tale, but um, it's the very real and really fascinating life of Nell Gwyn. And today we're going to take a deep dive into her world using the Noble Blood podcast episode, Nell Gwyn's Cinderella Story, as our guide.
I think what makes Nell's story so enduring is it speaks to a very, very, very human desire. The longing for something more, the possibility of rising above one's circumstances.
Absolutely. And born in 1650, right in the middle of England's very turbulent civil war, Nell's early life was anything but privileged. And the podcast does a really good job of painting a pretty vivid picture of this era, a time of really great upheaval and uncertainty.
Yeah, and for Nell, this uncertainty was very personal.
Oh, yeah.
Her father was a royalist soldier, and he ended up dying in debtor's prison. And it's a pretty grim detail, but one that really highlights the harsh realities of the time.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine the impact that must have had on her family. The podcast mentions that her mother ran a bawdy house, which, for our listeners who might not be familiar with that term, was essentially a brothel.
Yeah, it was a difficult way to make a living and often dangerous. And it speaks volumes about the very limited options available to women, especially those from impoverished backgrounds.
So how does a young woman in Nell's position go from that environment to becoming the most celebrated actress of her time? The answer, it seems, lies with the restoration of the monarchy in 1660.
Yeah, the return of King Charles II marked a new era for England, one characterized by a renewed interest in the arts and entertainment. And theaters, which had been banned under the previous Puritan rule, were reopened, creating a surge in demand for actors and performers.
And this is where Nell's story takes a pretty dramatic turn. Imagine her at just 14 years old, starting out as an orange girl, selling fruit to theatergoers in the hopes of just catching a glimpse of the performances.
It's a detail that really underscores her ambition and her drive. She wasn't content to just observe from the sidelines. She wanted to be part of the spectacle, to be on that stage.
And fate, it seems, was on her side. She transitioned to acting pretty quickly, captivating audiences with her comedic talent and really her undeniable charisma. Even the famous diarist Samuel Pepys was a fan describing her as Pretty Witty Nell.
Yeah, and that nickname, Pretty Witty Nell, I think captures her essence perfectly. It speaks to her charm, her intelligence, and really her ability to win over a crowd.
And her talent did not go unnoticed.
Yeah.
The Noble Blood episode recounts how she eventually caught the eye of King Charles II himself,
Right.
a man known for his charm and his many, many mistresses.
Yeah, it was a relationship that would scandalize the court and captivate the public's imagination. But
Sure.
but what's interesting is that their connection, according to the podcast, wasn't simply about physical attraction.
Right.
There was a genuine spark between them, a shared sense of humor and a mutual appreciation for wit and theatricality.
The podcast actually describes their first, official date. The king, along with his brother, the Duke of York, takes Nell and another gentleman out to a tavern. And in a hilarious twist of fate, neither the king nor the duke brought any money.
It's a detail that perfectly sets the stage for Nell's quick wit and audacity.
Imagine the scene, this young actress, surrounded by royalty quipping, "Odds fish? This is the poorest company I've ever dined with."
It's a moment that supposedly completely charmed King Charles II. And from that point on, their relationship blossomed. What started as playful banter and flirtation developed into a 17-year love affair that, despite the king's numerous other dalliances, proved to be far more enduring and deep than many expected.
They even had 2 sons together, Charles and James. And this is where things take another fascinating turn. Nell, ever the strategist, was determined to ensure that her sons would not be forgotten by history. She knew that their legitimacy and their future would be constantly challenged, given their unconventional parentage.
There's a famous story, perhaps embellished over time, where Nell supposedly dangles her son Charles from a window, demanding a title for him from the king.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It's an anecdote that speaks volumes about her boldness and determination. She wasn't going to allow her sons to be safely cast aside as, royal bastards.
And her efforts were successful. Through a combination of her wit, her strategy, and of course the king's favor, Nell secured titles of nobility for both Charles and James. An incredible feat, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It was a move that defied the rigid social structure of the time and really cemented her place in history.
Right.
Not just as the king's mistress, but as a mother who fiercely fought for her children's future.
Yeah, it really is remarkable how Nell was able to navigate those complexities of court life and secure a future for her sons.
Yeah, and let's not forget, this is all happening against the backdrop of 17th century England, a time of really immense social and political change.
And the Noble Blood episode does a great job of placing Nell's story within that broader historical context.
Mm.
You know, the Restoration period with its newfound embrace of the arts and entertainment that played a crucial role in her rise.
You can also feel the energy of that era, right? The theaters reopening after years of Puritan rule, a sense of liberation, and this thirst for spectacle.
And Nell, with her comedic timing and her, just undeniable stage presence, she became a symbol of that era. She wasn't just an actress, she was a cultural phenomenon.
Yeah, people were drawn to her wit, her charisma, and really her ability to poke fun at the conventions of the time. I wonder if there are any surviving accounts of her performances. It would be so fascinating to get a glimpse of what captivated those audiences.
While no complete scripts of her performances exist, we do have snippets and descriptions from, contemporary diarists and critics, and they paint a picture of a performer who is both hilarious and captivating.
The podcast mentions that she was particularly known for her breeches roles, where she dresses a man and satirized the foibles of the upper classes. Talk about challenging societal norms.
Exactly. And it's those challenges both on and off stage that contribute to her complex and enduring legacy. She embodied both the allure and the contradictions of her time.
On one hand, she's a symbol of social mobility, a woman who defied the odds to achieve success and influence.
But on the other hand, she was constantly judged and scrutinized for her choices, her relationships, and really her unconventional lifestyle.
It makes you think about how history remembers individuals, particularly women, who dared to break the mold. There's always that tension between admiration and disapproval.
It's a debate that continues to this day. Was Nell Gwyn a trailblazer who paved the way for future generations of women, or is she simply a product of her circumstances fortunate enough to catch the king's eye?
It's interesting how different interpretations of her life can reveal as much about the values of the interpreter as they do about Nell herself.
Precisely. And that's why her story continues to fascinate us. It forces us to confront our own biases and assumptions about power, gender, and social mobility.
There's also this element of mystery surrounding her, wouldn't you say? We have accounts of her life from various sources, but piecing together the real Nell Gwyn remains a challenge.
Absolutely. And the podcast highlighted this particularly when discussing how she secured a noble title for her son Charles. There's the famous story of her dangling him from a window, but there's also a version where she simply used her wit and charm to persuade the king.
It's like we're presented with these different facets of her personality, and we're left to decide which one feels most true.
That's the beauty of history. It's not always about finding definitive answers. It's about engaging with the complexities and the ambiguities. And Nell's story certainly offers plenty of both.
It's a tale that's been told and retold, embellished and reinterpreted for centuries.
But even amidst all the variations and interpretations, one thing remains constant: Nell Gwyn's ability to captivate our imaginations.
So let's talk about that captivating legacy. What are some of the key takeaways from her story that you think are relevant to us today?
Well, I think one of the most important aspects of Nell's story is its reminder that even in seemingly rigid and hierarchical societies, individuals can make a difference. They can carve out their own paths, challenge the status quo, and leave a lasting impact.
Her story is a testament to the power of resilience, isn't it? Despite facing poverty, societal prejudice, and personal tragedies, Nell never gave up on her ambitions.
And she did it with humor and wit, which I think is a valuable lesson in itself. Even in the face of adversity, she never lost her ability to laugh, to find joy in life, and to use her wit to navigate challenging situations.
It's also interesting to think about how her story reflects the enduring human desire for connection and belonging. Despite the differences in their backgrounds, Nell and King Charles II found common ground in their shared wit, their love of theater, and their affection for one another.
Absolutely. Their relationship, though unconventional by the standards of the time, highlights the universal need for companionship, for someone who understands and appreciates us for who we are.
It also challenges our assumptions about power dynamics. While it's easy to view Nell as simply a pawn in the king's game, the podcast revealed a more nuanced picture of their relationship. They were both individuals with their own desires and motivations, and their bond transcended the traditional roles assigned to them by society.
It's a reminder that history is rarely black and white.
Hmm.
Relationships, especially those that defy societal norms, are often more complex than they appear on the surface.
And Nell's story, with all its twists and turns, certainly embodies that complexity.
It's a story that continues to intrigue, inspire, and challenge us centuries after she graced the stage and captivated the heart of a king.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the life and times of Nell Gwyn, what's one final thought you want to leave our listeners with?
I think it's this. Nell Gwyn's story reminds us that history is made up of individuals, each with their own unique journeys, triumphs, and failures. And by delving into these individual stories, we gain a deeper understanding of ourselves, our society, and the enduring power of the human spirit.
Yeah, it really is amazing how Nell Gwyn, even centuries after her death, still manages to spark our curiosity. Her story truly does have a timeless quality to it, doesn't it?
It certainly does, and that's evidenced by how her image has been portrayed and reinterpreted throughout history. I mean, think about it. She's been the subject of countless books, plays, operas, you name it.
And it's not hard to see why her life was just full of drama, intrigue, romance, and even tragedy. It's this story that has really resonated with people for generations.
But what's particularly interesting is how those interpretations have shifted over time.
Yeah.
In the years immediately after her death, Nell was often viewed through a very specific lens.
Right. There were those who saw her as a symbol of royal excess, a woman who used her charm and wit to climb the social ladder and gain influence over the king.
Exactly. She was often portrayed as a somewhat scandalous figure, someone who disrupted the social order and challenged the moral standards of the time.
But then, as time passed, a different perspective began to emerge. People started to celebrate Nell for her resilience, her spirit, and her willingness to defy those societal expectations.
She became a folk hero in a sense, a symbol of social mobility and in some ways female empowerment. People admired her ability to rise above her circumstances and create a better life for herself.
And it's fascinating how her association with charity also helped to shape her legacy. The podcast highlighted her efforts to release debtors from prison, which, knowing her own father's fate, adds another layer of depth to her story.
Absolutely. Those acts of compassion and generosity further softened her image and contributed to the more positive view that emerged over time.
It just goes to show how history is constantly being rewritten, filtered through the values and perspectives of each generation. What might have been scandalous in one era can become a source of admiration in another.
Precisely. And Nell Gwyn's story serves as a powerful example of how perceptions can evolve. It's a reminder that history isn't static. It's a living, breathing narrative that's constantly being shaped and reshaped.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Nell Gwyn's world, what do you think are the most important lessons that her story offers? What makes her legacy relevant to us today?
For me, one of the key takeaways is the power of individuality.
Hmm.
Nell refused to be defined by her circumstances or the expectations of others. She carved her own path, embraced her unique talents, and used them to achieve her goals.
She reminds us that we all have the potential to make a difference regardless of our background or our social standing. It's a message that transcends time and continues to inspire.
And let's not forget her resilience. Nell faced countless challenges in her life. Poverty, prejudice, personal loss, yet she never gave up. She used her wit, her charm, and her determination to overcome those obstacles and create a better future for herself and for her children.
She was a survivor in every sense of the word. And perhaps most importantly, she never lost her sense of humor. Even in the face of adversity, she found joy, embraced laughter, and used her wit to navigate challenging situations.
That, I think, is a valuable lesson for all of us.
Yep.
To find that spark of joy, that ability to laugh, even when things are tough. It's a testament to the enduring human spirit.
Nell Gwyn's story, with all its complexities and contradictions, truly offers us a glimpse into the past while also holding up a mirror to our own present. It encourages us to examine our values, our assumptions about power and social mobility, and our own definitions of what it means to lead a fulfilling life.
It's a story that continues to intrigue, inspire, and provoke those meaningful conversations. And that's the power of history, well told.
Well said. A huge thank you to you for joining us today and sharing your insights into this remarkable woman's life.
It was my pleasure.
And to our listeners, we hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of Nell Gwyn. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking out the stories that connect us to the past and illuminate our present.